The Devourer fleet arrived at Earth on a Tuesday morning, just as the first alien ships had 3 years earlier. But this time, the mechanical armada that emerged from hyperspace was so massive that it cast shadows across entire continents. 1,000 ships of geometric metal and cold logic come to consume humanity's homeworld and convert its resources into more machines of war. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the command bridge of Liberty Station, the massive orbital fortress that had become Earth's primary defensive platform. Around him, the command staff worked with calm efficiency despite knowing they faced impossible odds. The weight of command had aged Jake in the years since first contact, but his eyes still held the determination that had impressed the aliens at their first meeting. Colonel Lisa Hayes stood at the tactical station, coordinating the defense of 12 orbital platforms and 400 ships of various sizes. Her hair had gone gray during the long war against the Devourers, but her strategic mind remained sharp as ever. She studied the enemy formation with professional interest. Admiral, they're deploying in standard Devourer attack pattern. Maximum firepower concentration against our strongest positions. They expect us to fall back to secondary defensive lines. Commander Pete Adams managed communications from his station, keeping contact with human fleets scattered throughout the solar system. His fingers danced across the controls as he coordinated the most complex military operation in human history. Sir, all stations report ready. Mars Defense Command acknowledges orders. Lunar Base confirms weapons online. General Sam Murphy had come up from Earth's surface to witness humanity's final battle. The old soldier's face showed the strain of 3 years of constant warfare, but his voice remained steady as he reported on ground defenses. Admiral, surface installations are prepared for extended bombardment. If any of those mechanical bastards make it through your defenses, we'll be ready for them. Dr. Elena Vasquez worked at the intelligence station, analyzing Devourer movement patterns and searching for any weakness they could exploit. Her dark eyes studied holographic displays showing enemy ship configurations. Jake, they're bringing everything they have. This isn't just an invasion fleet, it's their entire military force. Captain Steve Johnson commanded the assault carrier Determination, flagship of the human attack fleet. His ship hung in space surrounded by 300 other vessels waiting for the signal to begin, what everyone knew would be humanity's last charge. Admiral, the fleet is ready. Every ship, every crew, every weapon we have. Commander Rick Taylor had transferred his command from the destroyed Guardian station to the new fortress Gibraltar, positioned between Earth and the approaching enemy. His voice carried across the tactical network with grim determination. All defensive positions report ready to receive the enemy. We'll make them pay for every mile. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell now commanded Air Group Alpha, the survivors of dozens of fighter squadrons formed into one final unit. Her pilots were veterans of impossible battles, men and women who had learned to fight machines with human ingenuity. Control? Fighters are armed and ready. We know what to do. Dr. Kate Williams supervised the medical stations throughout the defensive network, preparing to treat casualties from the battle that would decide humanity's fate. Her experience from the Tau Ceti rescue and countless other engagements had taught her to hope for the best while preparing for the worst. The alien observers had requested permission to witness what they believed would be humanity's final battle. High Counselor Thek stood with the human command staff, his logical mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The Velen representative maintained mental contact with key personnel, sharing their emotions and determination across the fleet. The Karathan delegate had integrated its systems with the human defense network, adding its computational power to their targeting systems. Admiral Morrison, High Counselor Thek said, his voice carrying concern for the first time since the humans had known him. The enemy force outnumbers your fleet by more than 3 to 1. Their individual ships are larger and more heavily armed than yours. The probability of successful defense is less than 2%. Jake looked out at the approaching mechanical fleet and smiled grimly. Counselor, we've beaten worse odds before, and this time we're fighting for our home. Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her intelligence displays with sudden excitement. Jake, I think I've found something. Look at their formation. It's perfect, mathematically optimal, completely predictable. That's what makes them so dangerous. Elena, no, that's what makes them vulnerable. They're thinking like machines because they are machines. They calculate the most efficient approach and execute it perfectly. But what if we don't respond the way they expect? Colonel Lisa Hayes studied Elena's analysis with growing understanding. You mean instead of defending from fixed positions, we attack their formation directly? Exactly. They've calculated our defensive capabilities and planned accordingly. But they haven't planned for us to abandon defense entirely and throw everything we have at them in one massive assault. General Murphy nodded slowly. It's crazy enough that it might work, or it might get us all killed faster. Commander Pete Adams was already running the numbers through his tactical computers. If we commit everything to one attack, we get no second chances. Miss and Earth is defenseless. Captain Steve Johnson's voice came over the communication channel from the assault fleet. Admiral, my pilots are ready for a full attack run. We can be on top of them before they know we're coming. Jake Morrison looked around at his command staff, at the aliens who had come to respect human courage, at the holographic display showing Earth hanging in space behind them. The blue and white planet looked so peaceful from space, with no sign of the billions of people depending on the decisions made in the next few minutes. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. New battle plan. We're not going to sit here and let them come to us. We're going to hit them with everything we have, all at once, before they can spread out their formation. High Counselor Thex's black eyes widened in shock. Admiral, this violates every principle of defensive strategy. You are abandoning all tactical advantages. Counselor, sometimes the best defense is a good offense, especially when the enemy expects you to be logical. The human fleet began moving toward the enemy formation with coordination that amazed the alien observers. 400 ships of different sizes and capabilities maneuvered with precision that rivaled the mechanical perfection of their opponents. But there was something else in their movement, something the Devourers could not calculate or predict. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell led her fighters in a diving attack that brought them in under the enemy sensors. Her pilots flew with the reckless courage that had become their trademark, using every trick of human engineering and instinct to penetrate the Devourer defenses. All fighters, this is Angel Leader. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for everyone who ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of something better. Commander Rick Taylor's Fortress Gibraltar moved away from its defensive position and accelerated toward the enemy fleet. The massive structure was never designed for high-speed maneuvering, but human engineering teams had modified its engines for this final battle. All stations, this is Gibraltar Control. We're taking this fortress into the enemy formation. Any Devourer ship that wants to reach Earth will have to go through us. Captain Steve Johnson's assault fleet formed the spearhead of the human attack. 300 ships accelerated to maximum speed, their weapons charging for the concentrated bombardment that would either break the enemy formation or destroy humanity's last hope. This is determination. All ships follow me in. Make them remember that humans don't surrender. The collision between the human fleet and the Devourer formation created explosions that lit up space like artificial stars. Ships on both sides disappeared in blasts of energy and vaporizing metal. The mechanical perfection of the enemy formation dissolved into chaos as human ships rammed, exploded, and fought with desperate fury. Dr. Elena Vasquez watched the battle display with professional fascination. Jake, it's working. Their command structure is breaking down. They can't adapt fast enough to our attack pattern. But the cost was enormous. Human ships were dying by the dozens, their crews sacrificing themselves to damage enemy vessels. The DICE communication channels filled with final messages from captains ordering their crews to abandon ship, while they stayed behind to manually detonate their reactors. Commander Rick Taylor's voice came over the network one last time. This is Gibraltar. We're going down, but we're taking half their command fleet with us. Tell Earth we held the line. The Fortress Gibraltar exploded in a blast that destroyed itself and 17 Devourer ships. The sacrifice opened a gap in the enemy formation that the human assault fleet exploited with deadly efficiency. High Counselor Thex watched the battle in stunned silence. Admiral, your fleet is destroying itself to damage the enemy. By any logical calculation, you are losing this engagement. Jake Morrison smiled as he watched the tactical display. Counselor, look closer. Count the enemy ships we've destroyed, versus how many they've destroyed of ours. We're trading quality for quantity, and it's working. The battle for Zenthar Prime began when the Devourer fleet emerged from dark space like a metallic storm. The homeworld of the Galactic Council's leaders hung in space, surrounded by defensive platforms and warships from a dozen different species. It should have been impregnable. But the mechanical invaders had brought a force so massive that it blotted out the stars. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Liberty, and watched the enemy fleet deploy with mechanical precision. Each Devourer ship moved to its assigned position with mathematical accuracy. Their formations were perfect, their timing flawless, their tactics optimal. It was like watching a computer program execute perfectly. High Counselor Thek stood beside him, his tall blue form trembling slightly as he watched his homeworld prepare for destruction. For the first time since Jake had known him, the logical Zenthari showed emotion. Fear, desperation, and something that might have been hope flickered across his alien features. Admiral Morrison, our evacuation ships can remove perhaps 10% of our population before the Devourers break through our defenses. The rest, including our greatest cultural treasures and libraries that contain 10,000 years of Zenthari history, will be lost forever. Jake studied the tactical display. The Devourer fleet outnumbered the defenders by 4-1. Every military computer in the fleet calculated their chances at less than 5%. It was the kind of hopeless situation that sensible commanders would abandon. Counselor, what if we don't evacuate? Thex turned his black eyes toward the human. Admiral, without evacuation, the death toll will be complete. Every Zenthari on the planet will perish. This is unacceptable. What if we don't let them perish? What if we hold the line long enough to save everyone? Captain Danny Clark of the destroyer Defiance spoke up from his position at the tactical station. The scarred veteran had survived more impossible battles than anyone had a right to. Admiral, the math doesn't work. We can maybe hold for 6 hours. Full evacuation would take 3 days. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, commander of Fighter Squadron 7, checked her flight status on the pilot ready board. Her young face showed determination that her grandparents would have recognized from old war photos. Sir, my pilots are ready for extended combat operations. We can buy you more time. Jake looked around the bridge at the faces of his crew. They all knew the odds. They all understood what he was asking. And they were all ready to do it anyway, because that's what humans did when others needed saving. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. We are implementing Operation Last Stand. Our objective is to hold this position until every Zenthari civilian is safely evacuated. Estimated duration, 72 hours minimum. Commander Rick Taylor's voice crackled over the communication system from his position aboard the space station Guardian. Admiral, my crew volunteers to hold the orbital approaches. We can give you clean firing lanes from the high ground. Dr. Lisa Grant, now serving as the fleet's chief medical officer, activated the emergency medical protocols. Her hospital ships moved into position behind the main battle line, ready to receive casualties from a fight that promised to produce many of them. The alien representatives on the bridge watched with expressions of bewilderment and growing respect. The Velen touched their minds and found something she had never encountered before: absolute certainty in the face of certain death. These humans knew they were doomed, but they were going to fight anyway. The Korathan delegate, its metallic body gleaming under the bridge lights, spoke in its grinding voice. Admiral, your tactical computers must be malfunctioning. They show a survival probability of less than 1%. The computers are working fine, Jake replied. Sometimes 1% is enough. The battle began when the Devourer Advance Guard opened fire with weapons that could crack planets. The first salvo destroyed 2 Zenthari orbital platforms and damaged a dozen ships. The mechanical precision of the attack was terrifying to watch. Every shot hit exactly where it would do maximum damage, but the human fleet responded in a way that shocked both their allies and their enemies. Instead of falling back to regroup, they charged directly into the enemy formation. Captain Danny Clark led the attack in his destroyer, her weapons blazing as she tore into the Devourer line. All ships, follow me in. Danny called over the tactical channel. "Make them pay for every inch." Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell's fighters swarmed around the massive Devourer ships like angry hornets. Her pilots flew attack runs that defied every principle of fighter tactics, using their small size and human reflexes to exploit weaknesses that computer-guided defenses couldn't predict. Commander Rick Taylor's space station became the anchor point of the human defense. The Guardians' massive weapons reached out across the battlefield, providing cover for damaged ships and coordinating the defense of key positions. Rick's crew worked with mechanical efficiency, but driven by human determination. High Counselor Thex watched the battle display with growing amazement. "Admiral, your losses are mounting rapidly, but the Devourer advance has been stopped. How is this possible?" Jake studied the tactical readout. Human ships were indeed taking heavy casualties, but they were inflicting damage far beyond what their numbers should have allowed. "They're not fighting the way the Devourers expected. Every time the mechanical fleet calculates an optimal response, our people do something that doesn't fit the pattern." Dr. Lisa Grant's voice came over the medical channel. "Admiral, casualties are heavy but manageable. Request permission to move forward rescue ships to recover survivors from disabled vessels." "Negative, Doctor. Too dangerous." "Sir, there are people dying out there who we can save." Jake closed his eyes for a moment. This was the hardest part of command, balancing mission objectives against the human cost. "Permission granted. But keep those rescue ships moving. Don't give the Devourers stationary targets." The second wave of the enemy attack came 12 hours into the battle. Fresh Devourer ships arrived to replace their losses and press the assault with renewed fury. The mechanical fleet had adapted to human tactics and was now countering them with deadly efficiency. Captain Danny Clark found himself surrounded by enemy ships, his destroyer's shields failing and his weapons nearly exhausted. The logical choice was to retreat and preserve his ship for the larger battle. Instead, he gave an order that would have bewildered any alien observer: all power to engines, ramming speed. The Defiance accelerated directly toward the largest Devourer ship in the formation. Danny's crew worked frantically to prepare their vessel for impact, knowing that none of them would survive the collision. They sang an old human battle song as they charged into certain death. The impact destroyed both ships in a blast of light that could be seen from the planet's surface. But the explosion also damaged 3 other Devourer vessels and disrupted their formation long enough for the human fleet to regroup. High Counselor Thex stared at the tactical display in silence. "Admiral, Captain Clark's sacrifice gained you perhaps 30 minutes of tactical advantage. By any logical calculation, the cost exceeded the benefit." "Maybe," Jake said quietly. "But Danny bought something you can't calculate. He bought hope. He showed every person in this fleet that we're not backing down, no matter what the odds." The alien watched as the human fleet continued to fight with renewed determination. Ships that should have retreated pressed their attacks. Crews that should have surrendered kept fighting even when their vessels were crippled. It was irrational, inefficient, and somehow magnificent. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell's fighter squadron was down to half strength, but her remaining pilots continued to fly missions that should have been impossible. They used their knowledge of human engineering to push their ships beyond design limits, flying faster and fighting harder than anyone thought possible. "Control, this is Squadron 7, Sarah called over the increasingly chaotic communication network. "We're seeing gaps in their formation. Request permission to try something crazy." Commander Rick Taylor, still holding his position on the Guardian station, answered her call. "Define crazy, Lieutenant. We're going to fly through their formation at maximum speed and plant beacon charges on their command ships. The bombers can use the beacons for precision targeting." Rick paused for a moment, calculating the odds of survival for such a mission. They were essentially 0. "Permission granted. Make it count, Sarah." The fighter attack that followed became legend. Throughout the galaxy, Sarah Mitchell and her pilots flew directly into the heart of the Devourer formation, dodging weapons fire that could vaporize their ships with a single hit. They used every trick of human flying, every instinct that separated organic pilots from artificial intelligence. 5 fighters went in, 2 came out, but the beacon charges they planted allowed the human bomber squadrons to target and destroy 4 Devourer command ships. throwing the mechanical fleet into temporary chaos. Dr. Lisa Grant worked tirelessly in the medical bays, treating wounds from weapons that human medicine had never encountered before. Alien physiology mixed with human injuries as crews from different species fought side by side. She found herself operating on Zenthari civilians who had been injured during evacuation, Korathan warriors whose metallic bodies had been damaged by energy weapons, and human soldiers who... The Devourer invasion began 6 months after the rescue at Tau Ceti. It started as reports of missing ships along the outer rim of the galaxy. Then entire colonies went silent. When the Galactic Council finally sent scouts to investigate, they found worlds stripped bare of all life, their surfaces covered with the geometric metal structures that housed the mechanical invaders. General Sam Murphy stood in the war room aboard the orbital defense platform above Earth and studied the holographic display of the galaxy. Red markers showed the advancing Devourer fleet. They moved like a plague across the star map, consuming everything in their path. The old soldier ran his weathered hand across his gray hair and shook his head. "They're not just attacking randomly," he said to the assembled human commanders. "Look at the pattern. They're cutting off our supply lines and isolating our strongest positions." Colonel Lisa Hayes leaned forward to examine the tactical display. Her sharp eyes traced the enemy movement patterns with the skill of someone who had spent decades studying warfare. "It's worse than that, General. They're learning our defensive strategies and adapting to them. Every time the Council tries a new tactic, the Devourers counter it within days." Commander Pete Adams sat at the communication console coordinating, with human fleets scattered across 12 star systems. His fingers danced across the controls as he tried to maintain contact with ships engaged in desperate holding actions against impossible odds. "Sir, we're getting reports from the Vega system. The Council fleet there is requesting permission to retreat." General Murphy studied the data from Vega. 3 alien species had committed their best ships to defend the system. They faced a Devourer force that outnumbered them 5-1. By every logical calculation, retreat was the only sensible option. "Denied," Murphy said firmly. "If they give up Vega, the Devourers get direct access to the core worlds. Tell Admiral Petrov to hold that line no matter what." High Counselor Thex entered the war room with his usual emotionless expression. The tall Zenthari had been studying human military tactics since the Tau Ceti rescue, trying to understand how humans accomplish the impossible. He carried a data pad covered with calculations and probability matrices. "General Murphy, I must protest this decision. The mathematical probability of successfully defending Vega is less than 12%. You are ordering those ships to certain destruction for no strategic gain." The general turned to face the alien with eyes that had seen too many wars. "Counselor, sometimes 12% is all you get. Sometimes you have to make that 12% count for everything." Dr. Elena Vasquez entered the room carrying intelligence reports from behind enemy lines. The tall woman with dark hair had become Earth's chief strategist through her ability to think like the enemy. She had spent weeks studying Devourer behavior patterns, looking for weaknesses in their seemingly perfect military machine. "General, I think I've found something. The Devourers operate on pure logic. They calculate the most efficient way to achieve victory and they execute that plan perfectly. But that's also their weakness." She activated the holographic display and showed combat footage from recent battles. The mechanical ships moved with mathematical precision. Their formations perfect, their tactics flawless. But when human ships did something unexpected, something that made no logical sense, the Devourers hesitated for precious seconds while they recalculated. "They can't understand us," Elena explained. When Captain Steve Johnson rammed his destroyer into their command ship at Alpha Centauri, their entire fleet stopped moving for almost 30 seconds. They couldn't process why someone would destroy their own ship for no apparent gain. Captain Steve Johnson himself entered the war room at that moment, his arm in a sling from his recent battle. He had survived the ramming attack through luck and quick thinking, but his ship and most of his crew had not been so fortunate. The loss showed in his eyes, but his determination remained unshaken. "The Devourers keep trying to predict our moves based on logical military doctrine," Steve said. "But we don't always follow doctrine. Sometimes we do things that make no sense, except to us." High Counselor Thek studied his datapad with growing confusion. But military tactics must follow logical principles. How do you achieve victory through illogical actions? General Murphy smiled grimly. Because sometimes the enemy expects you to be logical. Sometimes the best strategy is to do what no sane commander would ever do. The communication console lit up with urgent messages from across the galaxy. Commander Pete Adams read through them with increasing concern. Sir, we're losing ground everywhere. The Devourers just took the Rigel system. The Altair colonies have gone dark, and there are reports of enemy scouts near Earth itself. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. The war had come home. Colonel Lisa Hayes studied the defensive positions around Earth's solar system. Humanity had built an impressive network of orbital platforms, minefields, and patrol ships. But it would not be enough against the mechanical tide rolling toward them. General, recommend we evacuate non-essential personnel from Earth and the colonies, she said. We can't defend everything. Negative, Colonel. We evacuate nobody. Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her intelligence reports. Sir, the civilian population will be slaughtered. The logical choice is to preserve human life by retreating to more defensible positions. General Murphy walked to the observation window and looked down at Earth. The blue and white planet hung in space like a jewel, home to billions of people who had no idea their lives hung in the balance. Children played in parks while their parents worked and worried about ordinary problems. It was beautiful and fragile and worth everything. Doctor, the day we abandon Earth is the day we stop being human. This planet isn't just our home, it's our symbol. It represents everything we stand for. Hope, courage, the willingness to fight for what matters. High Counselor Thex approached the general with his datapad. Your emotional attachment to this planet clouds your strategic judgment. Earth has no special tactical value. Its loss would not significantly impact your military capabilities. You're wrong, Counselor. Earth has something your calculations can't measure. It has meaning. It's the world where humans learn to dream, to explore, to sacrifice for others. Lose Earth and we lose part of our soul. Captain Steve Johnson nodded in agreement. The general's right. We've all seen what happens to species that lose their homeworld. They survive, but they're never the same. They become cautious, careful, logical. They stop taking risks. And risks are what make us human, added Colonel Lisa Hayes. The risk to help strangers at Tau Ceti, the risk to hold impossible positions, the risk to try things that shouldn't work, but sometimes do. Commander, Pete Adams looked up from his communication console. Speaking of risks, sir, I'm getting volunteer requests from every human ship in the fleet. They all want to come home to help defend Earth. Dr. Elena Vasquez studied the tactical situation with fresh eyes. That gives me an idea. What if we use their volunteers against them? The Devourers expect us to spread our forces out to defend multiple targets. What if we do the opposite? What if we concentrate everything here? General Murphy smiled for the first time in weeks. You mean use Earth as bait? Draw every Devourer in the galaxy to one location? Exactly. They think logically, so they'll assume we're making a logical mistake. They'll commit everything they have to finish us off in one battle, but that also gives us one chance to hit them with everything we have. High Counselor Thex's black eyes widened as he understood the implications. You are proposing to risk your entire civilization on a single battle. If you lose, humanity becomes extinct. The odds against success are mathematically insignificant. Maybe, said General Murphy, but sometimes mathematically insignificant is the only chance you get, and sometimes humans do their best work when the odds are impossible. The Velen representative had been silent during the meeting, reading the emotions and thoughts of the humans around her. She finally spoke, her words appearing directly in everyone's mind. I sense something in your thoughts that we have no word for. It is not hope because hope requires some chance of success. It is not desperation because desperation leads to panic. What do you call this feeling? Colonel Lisa Hayes answered without hesitation. We call it duty. The duty to protect those who can't protect themselves. The duty to stand up to bullies, no matter how big they are. The duty to fight for what's right even when winning is impossible. Commander Pete Adams was already sending orders to the human fleet. All ships, this is command. New orders. Return to Earth immediately. We're making our stand here. Dr. Elena Vasquez began working on battle plans that defied every principle of military strategy. Instead of dispersing their forces, they would concentrate them. Instead of fighting defensively, they would attack. Instead of preserving their strength, they would spend it all in one massive gamble. Captain Steve Johnson checked his personal communicator and found messages from his crew volunteers. Even the wounded were asking to return to duty. Men and women who should have been in hospitals were demanding to join the fight. It was illogical, inefficient, and completely human. High Counselor Thex watched the humans prepare for a battle they could not win against an enemy they could not defeat. The jump to the Tau Ceti system was unlike anything the aliens had ever witnessed. 5 human ships appeared in the middle of what could only be described as hell itself. The star was collapsing in on itself, creating gravitational waves that twisted space and time. Radiation storms swept through the system like invisible hurricanes. Massive chunks of planets that had been torn apart by tidal forces tumbled through space at incredible speeds. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Intrepid and watched his sensors go crazy, trying to make sense of the chaos around them. Lieutenant Amy Parker sat at the helm, her hands dancing over the controls as she fought to keep the ship stable in the churning gravity fields. Chief Engineer Tony Rodriguez called up from the engine room, his voice crackling through the communication system. Captain, the engines are working at 150% capacity just to keep us in one piece. These gravity fields are trying to stretch us like taffy. Dr. Kate Williams moved between the medical stations, checking her equipment and preparing for casualties. She had volunteered to join the rescue mission even though everyone knew the odds were terrible. Medical officer Dr. Kate Williams had seen enough war to know that someone always got hurt when humans decided to do the impossible. The alien observers watched from their corner of the bridge with expressions of complete bewilderment. High Counselor Thex kept making symbols appear in the air as he tried to calculate the probability of mission success. The numbers kept coming back as essentially 0. The Velen was probing the minds of the human crew, trying to understand what drove them to risk everything for strangers. The Karathan studied the ship's systems, amazed that such primitive technology was somehow surviving conditions that would destroy more advanced vessels. Contact bearing 37 Mark 12, called the sensor operator. It's the Axiom. She's caught in the gravity well of that asteroid. The Devourers have her surrounded. Jake studied the tactical display and felt his stomach sink. The Karathan research vessel was trapped between a massive asteroid and 3 Devourer ships. The mechanical attackers were slowly closing in for the kill. Their ships looked like geometric nightmares, all sharp angles and weapon ports. The Devourers themselves were artificial intelligences housed in metal bodies that consumed organic life and converted it into more machines. Amy, can you get us close enough for a rescue attempt? Lieutenant Amy Parker grinned, which was never a good sign when Amy was piloting. Define close enough, Captain. And define possible. Before Jake could answer, the Devourer ships detected the human fleet. The mechanical vessels turned toward them with movements that were too precise and too fast for organic crews to survive. Their weapons began charging with an ominous red glow. Incoming plasma torpedoes, reported the weapons officer. 12 warheads, full spread. Amy Parker pushed the Intrepid into a dive that defied several laws of physics. The ship groaned and shook as it twisted through the gravity fields, using the stellar collapse to help dodge the enemy fire. 2 other human ships followed her lead, their pilots copying her impossible maneuvers. The aliens held on to whatever they could find as the artificial gravity struggled to compensate for the wild flight pattern. How is she doing that? Demanded the Karathan. Those maneuvers should tear the ship apart, Tony Rodriguez answered from the engine room. She's using the gravity fields to help turn, riding the waves instead of fighting them. It's completely insane and it shouldn't work, but Amy's the best pilot in the fleet. The Zenthari studied his floating calculations. The stress on your hull should have exceeded safety limits 17 seconds ago. Your ship should be debris. Jake smiled grimly. Tony, how are we doing down there? Well, Captain, the good news is that the engines are still attached to the ship. The bad news is that I'm not entirely sure how. I've got 3 different warning lights that I've never seen before, and the computer keeps asking me if I'm sure I want to continue existing. One of the human escort ships, the Challenger, broke away from the formation and accelerated directly toward the Devourer fleet. Captain Danny Clark's voice came over the communication channel. "Intrepid, this is Challenger. I'm going to give you a clear run at the Axiom. Tell my wife I love her." Jake watched in horror as the Challenger charged straight into the enemy formation. The small frigate's weapons blazed as it tore into the Devourer ships, drawing their fire away from the rescue operation. Captain Clark was sacrificing his ship and crew to give the others a chance. The aliens watched the display in complete silence. High Counselor Thex's symbols flickered and disappeared. The Velen's mental touch withdrew from the human minds as if burned. The Corathan's red eyes dimmed as it tried to process what it was seeing. "Why did he do that?" whispered the Zenthari. "His ship cannot survive that attack. He has gained nothing and lost everything." Dr. Kate Williams looked up from her medical station. "He gained us time. He gained those 17 Corathans a chance to live. Sometimes that's all you can do." Amy Parker piloted the Intrepid through the gap that the Challenger had created. The ship shook and groaned as enemy fire splashed against its shields. Warning, alarms blared throughout the bridge. The artificial gravity flickered, making everyone feel suddenly weightless before slamming them back into their seats. "Docking with the Axiom in 30 seconds, Amy called out. "I hope everyone has their insurance paid up." Tony Rodriguez appeared on the bridge, carrying a toolkit and wearing a radiation suit. "Captain, someone needs to go over there and manually override their docking clamps. Their systems are fried from the radiation." Dr. Kate Williams stood up and grabbed a radiation suit. "I'll go. If any of them are injured, they'll need immediate medical attention." Jake started to protest, but Kate was already suiting up. "Doctor, the radiation levels over there are lethal. You'll be lucky to survive 5 minutes." Kate sealed her helmet and checked her equipment. "Then I'd better work fast." The Intrepid slammed into the Axiom with a crash that rattled both ships. Amy had managed to dock them, but barely. The airlocks were misaligned and the seals were compromised. Atmosphere was leaking from both vessels. Dr. Kate Williams crossed to the damaged Corathan ship through an airlock that was more holes than metal. Her radiation detector immediately began screaming warnings at her. The levels were indeed lethal, but she ignored the alarm and began searching for survivors. She found them in the ship's central chamber. 17 Corathan scientists huddled around their failing life support system. Their metallic bodies were damaged from radiation exposure, with several showing signs of severe system failure. Kate began emergency treatment, using her medical knowledge to help mechanical beings she had never seen before. "Human," one of the Korath scientists spoke in a voice like grinding gears. "Why have you come here? Your organic body cannot survive this radiation." Kate worked frantically to stabilize the scientist's damaged systems. "Because you needed help. That's what humans do." Back on the Intrepid, Tony Rodriguez was performing miracles with the ship's engines. The gravity fields were trying to tear both ships apart, but he was using the fusion reactor like a musical instrument, adjusting power levels and field harmonics to keep them stable. "Captain, I can give you maybe 10 more minutes before something important explodes," Tony called up from engineering. And I'm using the word important very loosely here. Amy Parker was fighting the controls as the stellar gravity tried to drag both ships into the collapsing star. "Jake, we need to go, now." Dr. Kate Williams had managed to stabilize 12 of the 17 Corathans, but 5 were too badly damaged. To move safely, she made a decision that the aliens would never understand. She activated the emergency medical beacon in her suit. "Captain, I'm staying with the wounded. Get the others out of here." "Negative, Doctor. We don't leave anyone behind." "Sir, if we try to move these 5, they'll die. If we all stay, everyone dies. Get the healthy ones to safety. That's an order." Jake felt something tear inside his chest. The aliens watched as humans made the hardest decision in their moral code. Sometimes saving everyone meant sacrificing yourself. The 12 healthy Korath scientists were transferred to the Intrepid. As the ships prepared to separate, one of them asked High Counselor Thex a question that would haunt the aliens for years to come. Why did the humans risk everything for us? We are not their species. We offer them no benefit. Their actions make no logical sense. The Zenthari stared at the radiation readings from the Axiom. Dr. Kate Williams was still alive over there, still treating the wounded even as her own body began to fail. I do not know, Thex admitted. There is no algorithm that can explain this behavior. Amy Parker somehow managed to get both ships away from the gravity well, but not before the collapsing star began its final death throes. The stellar explosion sent a shockwave through the system that would have destroyed any ship caught in its path. Except Dr. Kate Williams had done the impossible. Using nothing but medical equipment and pure determination, she had managed to stabilize the 5 wounded, Corathans enough to move them. When the rescue ship arrived, they found her unconscious from radiation poisoning but still working. Tony Rodriguez met them at the airlock. "How did you do it, Doc?" Kate smiled weakly as the medical team carried her to sickbay. The massive alien ships appeared in Earth's sky on a Tuesday morning in the year 2387. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force vessel Intrepid and watched the 3 enormous craft hover above the planet like silver mountains. Each ship was 10 times larger than anything humans had ever built. Their surfaces gleamed with technologies that human science could barely imagine. Jake ran his hand through his short brown hair and took a deep breath. As captain of the Intrepid, he would lead humanity's first meeting with alien life. The responsibility felt heavier than the ship's gravity generator. Behind him, Dr. Lisa Grant checked her equipment for the 100th time. The xenobiologist had waited her whole life for this moment. Commander Ryan Bell stood at attention, his military training keeping him calm despite the historic nature of the day. Ambassador Maria Santos reviewed her notes one final time, knowing that her words could shape the future of the human race. The alien message had been simple and direct. They called themselves the Galactic Council. They wanted to meet. They would evaluate humanity to see if Earth deserved to join their organization. The message came in perfect English, which told Jake that these beings had been watching humanity for some time. The first alien ship sent a transport craft to the Intrepid. Jake watched through the viewport as the sleek vehicle approached. It moved without any visible engines or exhaust. The technology was so advanced that it seemed like magic. The transport docked with a soft hum that vibrated through the ship's hull. The airlock opened and 3 aliens stepped inside. Jake tried not to stare, but he had never seen anything like them. The first alien was tall and thin with blue-gray skin. Its head was larger than a human's, and its eyes were completely black. It wore a simple robe that seemed to shimmer in the light. This was High Counselor Thex of the Zenthari race. The second alien looked almost human except for its silver hair and purple eyes that seemed to glow softly. Jake could feel something strange when he looked at this being, like someone was gently touching his thoughts. This was the Velen representative, who communicated through telepathy. The third alien was the most impressive. It stood 7 feet tall, with metallic skin that reflected the ship's lights. Its body looked like it was made from liquid metal that had been shaped into the form of a humanoid. Red lights glowed where its eyes should be. This was the Corathan delegate, representing a race that had merged with their own technology long ago. High Counselor Thex spoke first. Its voice was flat and emotionless like a computer reading data. "Greetings, humans. We are representatives of the Galactic Council. We have observed your species for several of your decades. You have reached the minimum technological level required for evaluation." Jake stepped forward and tried to keep his voice steady. "Welcome to our space. I am Captain Jake Morrison. We are honored to meet you and learn about the galaxy beyond our world." The Zenthari's black eyes studied Jake like he was a specimen under a microscope. "Honor is an inefficient emotion. We do not operate on such concepts. We will conduct our evaluation according to standard protocols. Your species will be measured in 3 categories: technology, psychology, and physical capabilities." Dr. Lisa Grant activated her recording equipment and began taking notes. The Velen touched her mind, gently reading her thoughts without permission. Lisa felt the mental intrusion but tried not to react. Commander Ryan Bell noticed his hand moving toward his weapon and forced himself to relax. These beings could probably destroy Earth's entire fleet without effort. The evaluation began immediately. The aliens scanned the Intrepid from top to bottom, using devices that looked like simple metal rectangles. The Corathan examined the ship's engines and weapon systems with tools that seemed to appear from its metallic body. The Zenthari asked hundreds of questions about human government, society, and culture. The Velen probed the minds of the human crew, reading their thoughts and emotions like an open book. Jake answered every question honestly. He explained how humans govern themselves through democracy and law. He described human art, music, and literature. He talked about human values like freedom, justice, and the pursuit of happiness. The aliens listened but showed no emotion or interest. After 6 hours of testing, High Counselor Thex delivered the results. Your technology is primitive but functional. Your weapons are crude but effective for your current development level. Your psychology shows typical patterns of an emerging species: high emotional content, irrational decision-making, and unpredictable behavior patterns. Your physical capabilities are average by galactic standards. The Zenthari paused and consulted a device that projected symbols in the air. Overall evaluation: standard developing species. Classification: safe for limited contact. Recommendation: probationary membership in the Galactic Council with restricted access to advanced technologies. Jake felt disappointed, but tried not to show it. Humanity had been judged as average in every way. The aliens saw nothing special about his species. Before he could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The communication officer turned from his station with a pale face. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal. It's coming from the edge of the Tau Ceti system. A Corathan research vessel is under attack." The metallic alien's red eyes flared brighter. It spoke in a voice like grinding metal. "The research vessel Axiom carries 17 of our scientists. They were studying the collapse of the Tau Ceti star." The Velen's voice appeared directly in everyone's mind. "The attackers are the Devourers, ancient machines that consume entire civilizations. The Axiom is trapped in the system as the star dies. Any rescue attempt would be suicide." High Counselor Thex studied his floating symbols again. "The gravitational forces from the collapsing star make rescue impossible. The Devourer presence adds additional risk factors that cannot be overcome. The crew of the Axiom must be considered lost. This is unfortunate but acceptable." Jake stared at the alien in shock. "Acceptable? There are 17 people dying out there and you're just going to abandon them?" "They are not people. They are Corathans. And yes, we will abandon them, because attempting rescue would result in additional losses with no probable success." "This is logical." The captain felt something burning in his chest. It was a feeling the aliens had measured but never understood. It was the feeling that made humans charge into burning buildings to save strangers. It was the feeling that made soldiers throw themselves on grenades to protect their comrades. It was courage. "The hell we will," Jake said. "I volunteer the human fleet for the rescue mission." The three aliens stared at him with expressions that ranged from confusion to complete bewilderment. High Counselor Thex tilted its large head. "Did our translation systems malfunction? You wish to risk your vessels and crews for beings you have never met? For no possible gain? This makes no logical sense." Jake looked at Dr. Lisa Grant, who nodded firmly. He looked at Commander Ryan Bell, who was already calculating attack patterns. He looked at Ambassador Maria Santos, who gave him a smile that said she was proud to be human. "Maybe it doesn't make sense to you," Jake said, "but it makes perfect sense to us. We don't abandon people in trouble. Ever." The aliens exchanged looks that clearly said they thought humans were insane. High Counselor Thex made more symbols appear in the air. "This behavior was not predicted by our models. We must observe this phenomenon. We will accompany your vessels to study this irrational decision-making process." Jake nodded and turned to his crew. "All hands, prepare for combat operations. We have people to save." As the human fleet prepared to jump into the collapsing Tau Ceti system, the aliens watched with fascination. They were about to witness something they had never seen before. They were about to see what humans called courage, and they had no idea how to measure or understand it. But they were about to learn that some things in the universe could not be calculated or predicted. Some things could only be experienced. The rescue mission was about to begin.